we're back to starting the game. I'm going to be taking some pauses because I got to stack the money and count it for each player. Just did it for Blue. He's got about $17,000 and a bunch of options, all of them on cows, actually. A bunch of leases, the cheapest of which is 20 cows on Autumn Ridge. And that has a total of 20,000. I also can get 10 cows on my own property for 5. I think I'm going to try to do both of those. I have a fair amount of cash, but I want to get past this 10% before I do that, which, you know, is what kind of drove people not to get that harvest. I may actually just want to run my way all the way down the bad luck chain and make sure I have the money for it as far as I can. And yeah, and with the complete cycle of all the players, the only really exciting thing, Red bought a tractor. I have enough cash with Red as with Blue, maybe White as well, where I could buy another thing on this next round. Blue hasn't gotten very far at all, and I'm definitely going to buy. But I want it to hold, but the tractor makes sense because there's somebody out there hitting the harvests, potentially, who maybe would need to rent it. Green is not the guy with the tractor. By the core rules, they have to split. I'm not sure how much sense that makes, as I said before. Again, you know, there's all this wheeling and dealing kind of not well defined, but seems to be kind of make your deals as you like, yet you can't determine, yeah, I want you to plow my fields, I don't want you and 3 of my neighbors to share the job, you know. The chatter for this time around, Blue got jumped over to spring planting. Luckily, they still got one more option to buy their stuff because otherwise, and it's a good space. It increases your corn yield. I think I bought some more hay over here with Red. White, I have the feeling, also bought more hay. They're up to 30 acres of hay, 10 of it doubled. Yellow, no buy, no chances, nothing special. Brown didn't have enough cash to buy anything special. Some of the loans that we have out are quite hefty. Like this guy's 40 grand in debt. And remember, you only have a 50 grand limit, so he's heavily leveraged. Green here, landed here. They took the 500, but we haven't had a livestock sale yet. So, I mean, it's the same as everything else. It's just the values are quite high. Not as high as fruit. Fruit's the really risky stuff, I think. I only have 10 cows. We had a hay cutting with 20 acres instead of 10, and you just use a different column. It's just double the value. Now, that brings an interesting thing up that I want to talk about. $2,000 for the livestock, minus $1,000, and I got to reshuffle these anyway. So all I get is $1,000 for that, but whatever. As you go on in the game and become bigger and bigger, the early part of the game is really kind of challenging. I mean, not in terms of like mental tasks or anything of that nature, rather in terms of the luck is really likely to bring you down. But as you get larger, the operating expenses don't go up for the most part. Most of the hits are just a flat cash amount, but your increases in revenue are directly proportional to what you have. Now, diversifying is dangerous. The more different types of thing you're in, the more likelihood that you'll get some bad impacts for it. Of course, you also get more spaces that you gain income on, but that doesn't really pay out. So, you know, somebody who's diversifying into different, either the cattle or the fruit, is actually taking a little bit of additional risk on. But the bigger and bigger you get, the more stable you are, and the more boring the game gets. Is that possible? Yes, it is. And you're working towards this 250,000. That's a whole hell of a lot of money. It's a fair number of times around the board. There's just sort of this, why am I fucking doing this? I look back to see, and I've rated this like a 3 in the past, so I don't think I liked it as much as I thought when I was first describing it. Usually I'm fairly okay with rolling moves. This one just has so little going on in it. And then add to that another penalty because the rules don't really tell you what you need to know. There's the caveat of write your own rules, damn it. But alrighty. And I'll do some more cycles in a bit. And one of the things, though, that makes it more boring, and I forgot to shuffle the operating expenses, is that there's basically no decisions that you get to make once you get past here. In Monopoly and stuff, you have buying decisions regularly, you have housing choices, building, whatever. In most games, you're given a fair number of choices. Here, you make nothing as a player. You're just rolling dice and effects are just hitting you. Speaking of effects hitting you, white just landed here. A leaking electrical motor contaminates your load of feed with PCB. State Ag Inspector requires you to slaughter cows on your farm with no reimbursement, and unfortunately this affects him. This kills a ton of his cows. Now, this is leading me to believe that other than the lease markers, probably the options to buy should go back in the deck once they're done. I'm trying to remember something to say. When I came back around, I lost it. But anyway. Well, I cleared up all those things that aren't necessary to show who owns something. And moved them over, reshuffled, of course. Nothing interesting happened because nothing interesting can happen in this game. No. I mean, somebody made a pile of money. I think Yellow did some $6,000 off their second hay cutting. Just great die roll, a 6. Big variance. I don't mind that kind of randomness. So there's a weird thing though. There's no market, right? And even in a local area, I think there tends to be a little bit of market. Yeah, it just, to me, the idea is we're all in the same valley together. To some extent, the same impacts would be hitting us, and the same market effects would be in play. So if I got in a lot, well, it's possible somebody else's ground just isn't as good for this weather, and their own quantity of resources didn't come in as well, or they didn't have the time, or whatever. There's certainly variances even within a local area, but there's another bigger variance that tends to be in play, which is what the price of that commodity is. And that should affect everyone, right? So again, it's not a simulation at all. And it really is kind of a multiplayer solitaire, in part because of that. There's not a whole hell of a lot you're doing to anyone else. You're just running around the board. Anyway, somebody, Green, the last guy here, just got screwed. Drought year, go to second week of January. Do not collect your $5,000 year's wages. But I still have to check, make sure this is here. And I get that. So that's kind of a bummer for them. Because, not too big a deal if you're all the way back here already, except you have to go through the shit show again. But it really sucks when you're coming up close on that 5,000, because 5,000 is a nice, healthy chunk of money still at this game, at this point in the game. Yeah, variance. It doesn't take a lot to get you into a stable position. Even this round, people are just overall making money, not counting on this terribly much. Yeah, that's going to be helpful towards continuing to expand, etc. But it feels like we've reached the, hey, you know, we're okay stage, which does not feel realistic. It doesn't feel like a year in things should be okay. Green holding off on buying because lots of space here, and I want to go through the bad stuff before I get more. I already took one bad hit over here. Yeah. And then, I don't know, there's just, mechanically, there's things to remember in this game that are kind of painful, like the doubling, etc. Who owns which piece of property, having to keep these for that. There's just a lot that doesn't particularly work, and basically nothing that's good in this game. Oh well. At least it's not Agricola. I mean, that's the thing. This is objectively a worse game, right? But I'm willing to play this. I have almost no willingness to play Agricola. Agricola is like just a miserable experience. This is a waste of time, not a lot of fun, but at least you could socialize while it's going on, you know, and you could certainly be drinking beer. That the option to buy should go back. Uncle Bert dies and leaves you 10 acres of hay. If you can raise $10,000 in cash to pay inheritance tax and the small remaining mortgage, you know, it's worth it. So I'm gonna drop that down. I'm just past the first hay cutting. There's plenty of money there, and it's just extra, you know, extra size to my farm, which is a good thing. And that is very realistic. Farmers are constantly looking to expand their land. And not just because a larger farm is more stable. I think that actually becomes kind of problematic. Like there's a hump you have to get over, right? There's the farm you can work yourself, and this game kind of represents that across the board. And then there's the, this is too big for me alone, and now I'm gonna have to take on extra labor. And once you reach that hump, getting over that, once you get far enough past that, I think you can keep growing. You're not an agribusiness type solidity, but I think there's a huge difference between, you know, among other things, there's personal responsibility in there. You know, if you've got a paid hand and, you know, you're giving them expected amounts of time, but then your cash flow is getting too tight, you really don't want to let them off. I guess you'll choose that rather than selling property or whatever. But one of the other things is property value tends to still go up, even in farmland. And so buying that extra land, even if you're not using it, you can let it lie fallow, you know, rotate, whatever, which has its own advantages. And finally, it's a place to reserve your capital that's likely to make some money, you know, that you know about too, you know. An intimate knowledge of what you're investing in is important. Anyway, we're going to buy that, slap it down. We're getting people with some pretty good hits of money. So white landed here. I don't know if that was it. No, brown landed here, doubled their check, which gave them, with their 10 acres of hay, because it's already doubled, gave them a 40-acre hay run. But they didn't get a lot of money off of it. They got a shitty roll, 2,400, and barely, they made 400 because they got the tractor thing, so two other people made 1,000 off of it. But I think white here got something incredible, right? Is that white? It did, yeah. So they're sitting on 40 acres of hay too, but they got like 6,000 bucks. However, somebody, I don't know if it was them or these guys, making a good run, got like a $3,000 seed bill, which again, early on, that can crush you. You have $5,000. Of course, it doesn't destroy you out of the game. It just means that you end up taking a loan, but the loan, you only get 80% of the money from it because of the penalties, and it puts you really on a bad foot if you get off to one of those big hits early in the game. And they can be in here, and they can be coming from your operating expenses. You also don't have the big harvests of the livestock and the fruit, but you can't really afford those. Those have some big kicks to them. At this point, I think people can afford them safely and can afford to be diversified, to be honest. We're seeing some good cash coming through. I'll do a money check at some point or another. I don't know. It's hard to tell what a year is anymore because people are jumping all over the board. You know, it's like people are on different years. There's nothing to tie everybody together at the same place, same time. Just like with Monopoly, but again, I find that very disturbing whenever you screw with time. Green for blue, after I did my check for victims on my porch. Got a nice run here. Extra $500 added to things. Doubled, got a good roll, $8,000. But I picked this up, and like I said, cows and fruit are dangerous. Okay, so $500 per cow. I got 30 cows. That's $15,000. Now I owe $7,000, and I just bought that. I just bought the farm. It turns out I have enough money to pay that, but man, it's kind of close. I can't take another hit. After White hits one of the rarer hay cutting places that are hard to hit, and pulls in, you know, 4,400 off of shit. I think I did the wrong thing. I should be getting another 4,400. I think I counted this. Again, I have a really hard time seeing what's here. I see this white, and there's a red line here, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I ended up going this way instead of that way or something. I think that's definitely my roll, 4,400. It should be here, and so I owe that. I get that money, but I got a card which shows, hey, maybe you should be allowed to make those choices, because this thing gives you a 50% bonus after you roll for livestock harvest check for the next 2 years. I don't have any livestock yet, but this is a huge incentive to get it, because I will know in advance that I have this bonus. Anyway, I got to give them that extra money. This where size definitely doesn't help you, especially, you know, because you basically take it on credit, is when you have to pay the bank interest. Here, I made it through my Christmas vacation, $5,000 for my year's wages or whatever, but 3,700 of them eaten up by this, and it'll be completely eaten up if you're leveraged to the maximum of $50,000. All the same, I see no reason not to maintain maximal loans until such a point as you have so much money that you don't know what to do with it anymore. You're much better off investing in farming than in paying off your loans. Your loans, you know, farming is a good business, and it makes sense to take out loans to be farming. Therefore, it makes sense to invest your money as much as you possibly can rather than pay down your debt. But eventually you come to a point where there's no more capability to grow. Well, that may not be the case if I keep throwing the option to buys back in, which I've chosen to do, because you will keep getting more, you know, it's hard to run out of these cards. I guess eventually if you have enough money, yeah. but you're probably close to winning the game at that point. Things are. Now this is with a good roll. Blue landed here. That cuts the livestock in half. He's got a fair amount of livestock in play. He's got 30 cows. The roll of 5 on 30 cows was 15,000, so that drops it to 7,500. You know, feels good, but then I also got hit with the banknotes. I still make $5,000 though. You know, I'm still cranking some good money there. You just have to have a little bit more padding for when you hit the bad stuff as you go through. One thing that I've been thinking about is hey, how do I tell when I'm over the 250? Because that's not a trivial thing to figure out, which is why there's a penalty for failing your audit and stuff like that. But it means there's this additional burden. It's not like, say, there was a similar situation in the old Avalon Hill Rail Baron where, but that's cash on hand, where you hit a certain amount of cash on hand and you kind of declare for victory. Well, here you hit a certain amount, but you got to figure the amount. It's not just your cash. You got to subtract your loans. Okay, that's not so bad. You can pay off your loans when you have that much cash on hand, but you also have to worry about what you've got sitting here. And these are not all equally valued. So these are worth 10,000 each. These are worth 5,000 each, and then the fruit, I think, is worth 25,000. You got to kind of look at the options to tell. No, these aren't worth 5. These are worth 20 each. 10 acres of hay is 20. I think grain is 20 as well. And then you also have the costs of the tractors and stuff like that. And there's no cheat sheet to help you figure this. You have to remember based on what the option costs were, I think. It may be in here. Here it just says assets. Audit. It doesn't give you the costs in the audit either. Obviously, you could write this up and create a little cheat sheet. The problem is, and that would be wise, and I should do that. But the problem is, it seems like, you know, just such a simple little game that you shouldn't really require all kind of additional stuff like that. It's just painful. And I'm lazy. As lazy as the designer was for not including, you know, it could just be a simple sheet of paper that's included in that gives you the values rather than any kind of thin stock like this. Overall, the components are pretty crappy though. I had nothing going on basically. Red and white didn't hit anywhere. Yellow moved here, got some cash, great, whatever. But I noticed that I had forgotten to rotate these suckers. And this is really, you got to be able to catch this. There's no reminder to do it. But, you know, I don't know how much that reminder would help if it was there. I know that I need to do this. Find the right farm. It's hard to find the farms. I would rather, you know, honestly, I would rather the blob be the color of the player and screw it. This attempt to try to create the view of the valley, whatever, it's so hideously done. It's not any prettier as far as I'm concerned than making an area the color of the player, and it's definitely more confusing. The graphics are not good enough to warrant taking the play value down. Crappy sequence here. Let's see, Brown got their third hay cutting and made some good money off of it, $5,000 or whatever, including all penalties. But green lands here, hurt back, go to second week of January. I don't have enough cash to buy anything, especially with this wheat harvest problem. And now I'm thrown, sorry, second week of January. I'm thrown back here where I get an option to buy, great, whatever. But you know, I just don't have the cash on hand to handle that. So now I have to pass through the spiral of evil again. And that's sort of the bad part about this hurt your back, is that you're going to get more bad luck out of it. and you didn't get your 5,000 bucks, which would make up for some of the problems maybe. Another sequence. It's kind of nice about the no decisions for long periods of time is, well, you can kind of run on autopilot, you know. It just becomes sort of this mechanical action to get through the turn. And to some extent, I like that in games, right? I like the idea of I set something in motion and see what happens from it. This goes a little too far. Anyway, a couple of people who had basically nothing happen, just a little shifting of money. Yellow got jumped ahead to spring planting. That's great for these. I don't have enough cash to buy anything of use. Had to reshuffle the option to buys, by the way. I hope I handed it out. I may have forgotten to hand one out there. I think not. About the option to buy, the options to lease these are handed out to people. Now they're competitive. Only one person can hold any given one. But what that means is that other stuff recycles in the way that I'm playing it. Maybe that other stuff just shouldn't. I think the reshuffle's good. It should shorten the game because people can invest more and make more money more quickly and whatever. But it does mean that some of the option buys are garbage. That's the case early in the game, but then later in the game, let's say everybody has a tractor and a harvester already. Well, then those cards, they end up just dying in your hand, basically. But yeah. Now, there could come the possibility of people saying, hey, I need some cash to do something. I'm willing to sell a card. Is somebody willing to pick it up? But then all you really have is two people, probably one who's doing very well, who's willing to pay some cash for additional investment, both kind of gaining. One gets cash that they need maybe to get an investment on the board quickly, but the other gains the option to buy card that maybe they're handcuffed and can't pick up. Another time around the board. Now, Brown, got kind of lucky. Ooh, I forgot his Farmer's Fate. No effect. Brown got kind of lucky, got his fourth hay cutting in too. He's been just running that hay. His hay is doubled. That's kind of cool. But he still lost money off of it, getting a shitty roll, 800 bucks. It ended up having to pay 1,000 from the operating expenses. Again, you need size. And basically anything you're invested in, you want to have size on. And unfortunately, you start invested in two different types of crop. It might make sense to sell off some of that land to allow people to consolidate. I don't know. But yeah. All right. We'll try to get another couple cycles in here. This is just so much easier, It's no more fun than Agricola was, but at least it doesn't have the pain levels involved in it. Spring planting, I decide to buy this hay. Now I'm up to my maximum at this point of 50,000. I don't have a huge amount of cash on hand, more than the 5,000, but not by much, that you kind of should keep. I like to keep around 10, but I wanted the extra padding because this means the hay is less likely to screw me, right? Having only one hay is painful. By the way, I'm a little concerned with the hay, wheat, corn combination as if they're dedicated fields. This isn't, again, I don't know a hell of a lot about farming. I grew up in farmland, but and understand some things, some of which are that things like crop rotation actually works, and that you don't want fields devoted to a particular crop. You want to be putting in different things. But that aside, even so, it seems to me that you'd be definitely rotating between your hay and your grains and whatnot. that's sort of the let a field lie fallow for hay. I don't see someone, and again, I may be completely wrong here, but I don't see someone growing just hay. That's generally, I thought, I'm leaving this field fallow for a season or whatever. So something feels a little wrong there, as opposed to, like, making the distinction between whether you want to grow corn or soybeans and whether you want to rotate them in and out and whatnot. That has more to do with the type of farming that you're doing. But definitely, from what I know, you don't just say, yeah, I'm devoting 50 acres to hay all the time. Now, you could say that's being abstracted out, but you wouldn't actually be buying acreage for hay. You'd be buying acreage that you use to plant something in, and sometimes you let it go fallow and grow hay and grow grass in it. Just let the wild grasses grow, and you cut them down and take them away. And the same thing with grazing. Your cows would be grazing on some of your fallow land. Now that doesn't bother me as much because you'd take a real, a money crop and you'd rotate it in and out. But there's just something that feels completely wrong here about the idea of devoting acreage to hay no matter what, as opposed to as a byproduct. So green, well, we might as well take their die roll, I don't know. So I collect a quick $1,000 here. This isn't green. This is yellow I was doing. Yeah. Okay. I've got 20 acres, so I'll be on this chart. 4, I get 3,000 minus 500. So I make $2,500, which is pretty cool. As long as hay doesn't lose your money, it's good. Cycle, I guess the biggie was Red got a kind of bell ringer corn harvest. They only have 2 corn, but it's doubled. No, they only have 1 corn, but it's doubled, which means I screwed up because I counted them at 2 and then doubled that. So I owe. Yeah, so it's not the 15,000 I thought it was. It's 7,500, which is not that big. Right? Right. Okay. Oops. Well, glad I came online, or else I wouldn't have noticed that at all. And the reason I came online was actually now lost. Oh yeah. So something like this. This windy spring didn't get your wheat sprayed. This was already out there. Weeds cut your wheat crop in half. Hold this card through wheat harvest for this turn. Okay. Well, that sucks. But you know what? At this point in my period, no, I'm not on the rag. At this point in my cycle, I would cut my losses. I would refuse to harvest my wheat or whatever, because if I happen to just miss it, there's no penalty for me, right? I don't get this cash payout, but I mean, this option doesn't exist in the game. You can't choose not to harvest due to the danger of the operating expenses. So if you've got a shitty situation where, your die roll is not likely to do you any good, you don't have the option to just refuse it. But I'm in spring and I know this, right? Now, granted, some of the operating costs are amortized, but there's actually a problem there. If I miss my wheat harvest, that seems to imply that I completely failed to put that wheat in. I don't know. It's sure, you can come up with some hand-wavy type excuses as to why something worked the way it did, but I should know that at this point or something, right? Not when I get to this space. And again, you start fucking with time and time relationships, and not simply everybody should be on the same clock, but something else here, which is that that there's knowledge that I have that I should be able to act on. You know, at this point, I should be able to cut my losses for what, you know, maybe just, hey, if you got this, you can say, well, I'm not going to do a wheat harvest, period, the end. But I had to plow my fields and whatever, and there's just a base cost. But it should be something that I'm deciding. There's so little in this game that actually links well to the reality. So much better than Agricola does, but waiting for Brown to make its way around Christmas vacation. Everybody else has kind of made it. They're kind of dawdling, but Green got thrown back again by bad back. Just, you know, kind of like stuck in this cycle of nothing happening, you know, and time not passing, because as everyone knows, when your back hurts, time slows down, even if everybody else is moving forward at the normal rate. Around hitting here, I kind of screwed up and forgot that I was within range that I could go over. I really wanted to lease these cows because of my special ability for this round around. I'm maximal, I'm up to my 50,000 leverage, and I had to spend a lot of money. I had a lot of money in hand, but yeah, so leveraged on loans that I'm down to, you know, an amount that I'm not thrilled with. I wouldn't have bought this, except it's the only cattle that I had available to me. I actually have 2 copies of that same thing. And I sure don't want to do something else when I've got this bonus in play. Reaching around, let's see. Yellow got what seemed like a kind of nice run off of not much grain. I don't know what it was. No, hay. It was like a 1200 or something. Yeah, I don't know. Does that make sense? Yeah, I've got 2 of them, so 1200 is possible. It was a 1200 run on grain, sounded okay. And then I pulled one of the few things that is affected by your total acreage, and ended up owing $3,000 on that and losing money on hitting the hay cutting. You know, I assume I took care of that. I don't remember. And then Brown still inching their way forward, and Green probably getting ready to hurt his back again and never finish this year. It's Groundhog Day. Round, I think Yellow did okay on their wheat harvest. I've spread everybody's money out because this is a time to kind of evaluate the situation. We'll see how often I do this kind of shit, but because it's kind of expensive in terms of spreading everything out, and then I have to clean it all back up. But this is going to be the end of this video. Blue is sitting here with a little under $20,000 in cash, $25,000 in debt, and got some cows down here, so 30 cows, otherwise pretty close to starting position. Not too impressive. But I'm moving along, right? You know, still, debt has increased, whatever. One thing that I've noticed where debt increases, so if you don't have a lot of cash when you come into here, you might end up with pretty good cash, but not much debt. And we'll see somebody over here who has that situation. This guy, not fully leveraged, a little under 30,000 in debt, and at 30,000 in cash on hand. About equivalent in terms of positioning. And so that's about equivalent cash-wise to what he's holding. I've got a tractor, but otherwise I'm behind by all those cows, you know. So red is not doing as well as blue, that's pretty clear. Take a look, and you wouldn't know how your neighbors are doing until they ask for an audit or whatever. Now, if I wanted to calculate my valuation for whatever, these are 20,000 each, so that's another 60,000 that I have, and the cows are 5,000 each. So Net worth here is about 75,000. If I count that the money and loans are about a wash. Whereas this guy, oh, shit. I think I'm there. This guy is sitting at 20, 40, 60, 70,000. So they're actually not that far apart. The tractor is kind of expensive. Cows are pretty cheap in and of themselves. Even though there was a high price for these cows, that price got absorbed. So, you know. But cows probably bring more money than tractors do. Over here to White. Not a lot of cash on hand. Under 10,000. Yet $50,000 in debt. And then if we look at what he's got, we got to find White. White's over here. So 20, 40, 60, 70, 80, 90,000 there. But remember, I'm like 40,000 off. So my net worth is somewhere around 50,000. But by leveraging myself so much, I have a bigger potential hit. I mean, if I get like a good run on cows or something, I'm going to be in really, really good shape. If I miss cows and don't do well on other things, I could end up thrown into the bankruptcy situation, which would suck. Okay. Next is over here. 10, somewhere around 15,000, but I'm leveraged fully at the 50,000, which always sucks. But a lot of property. 20, 40, 60, 80, 90, 100,000 worth here. Say I'm 35 in debt off that. That puts me at about 65. So I'm doing okay in overall cash. And in terms of, you know, positioning, well, I've got the extra wheat and it's doubled this time or whatever. I don't know, you know, how that compares with, like, say this. So I'd say we're probably pretty close to each other. Over here, 25, say a little under 30,000 in cash, but only $10,000 in debt. This is because he didn't have the cash to buy cards before, but made a reasonable run, collected up some decent income, inching along, and probably is going to end up buying more stuff. So what did we say this was? 30,000, I'm worth plus 20, 40, 60, 65. Again, probably not in bad shape, even though I didn't leverage a lot of debt. I'm going to have to now, though. So, you know, or I'm going to want to. I don't have to. You can play without taking out a lot of debt, but the advantage of having your farm bigger is worth a lot more than the penalty of hitting this. This was exceptionally advantageous, though, that I had very little debt when I hit here. So it doesn't, you know, screw me up completely. And over here, under 10,000 again, but, you know, maybe negative 4,000 total for green. Not a lot of property, though. And a bone card out there. So I'm looking at being worth about 20,000 and maybe in last place right now. Just to give you a feel of what's going on. I have enough cash to leverage some more debt and get some of my options cards played. Load this one up. I don't know how long these go. My new camera, it's not that new anymore, but it doesn't allow me to keep track of the total amount of time that I've eaten up on it. So even though it's the same brand as the other ones, it is far worse in many ways. Burns energy, has too much functionality baked into the screen, all kind of things wrong with it. But I have not been able to find my old ones anymore. And they, you know, this is the upgraded version of it, the more modern version, and it just doesn't help me as much. And after my expedition into that Samsung over there, which works perfectly fine, except they don't have all the sort of supplemental material. My recharger My accessory charger doesn't hold it. I could get one that does. I don't have any excess batteries that fit in it. I have all kind of batteries for this Iverian type. And worst of all, and why I bought it and had a working camera that I didn't use anymore, well, it's got two problems with it. One is I've ended up thinking I was recording and I'm not because of the way it works. I lost about a 30 to 40 minute interview with Frank Chadwick because of that, and I'm kicking myself on that still to this day. It was a really wonderful discussion about the game he was designing at the time, which I don't think actually got published. It was for VPG, big upgrade of sort of one of his simpler World War II designs. And then the other facet, because I could learn to be able to deal with, when I'm recording, when I'm not, just through use. The other thing is it turns everything yellow, which is a complaint that I heard Hipshot giving, and why he only uses telephones. He only uses his phone to video stuff. That actually might be an option. My wife has a phone that I'm thinking I still have my work phone, but I don't think I should be hooking that up and using that for these purposes. That's a fancy iPhone. My wife has had, because I guess it's mine now, a couple of phones, and they might actually be better solutions than this. There's also her cameras, which I have over there, and elsewhere, I think. I don't know. I found them too difficult to use and a little too big and heavy and bulky. They look more like big professional. They're not really video cameras, even though video was one of the things she was using them for. But they don't have this comfortable little handheld state that those guys do. And I ought to really try to hook up my receiver and see if I want to get a real stereo set up again someday.